They told you it was inevitable. They told you the transition to green energy was a foregone conclusion. They told you that by 2030, the world would be powered by wind and solar, and the internal combustion engine would be a relic of the past. Governments passed laws. Corporations pledged trillions. ESG funds reallocated entire economies based on this promise. But today, in late December 2025, the factories are silent. The assembly lines are stopping. The green energy revolution didn't die because of a lack of political will. It didn't die because of climate denial. It died because of physics. It died because of the periodic table of elements. Specifically, it died because of element 47, silver. With silver trading at $76 an ounce and physical inventory effectively zero, the mathematical model that underpinned the entire renewable energy sector has collapsed. We are witnessing the first resource-constrained industrial failure of the modern age. And the terrifying part is that nobody in Washington, Brussels, or Davos bothered to do the math until it was too late. Let's look at the solar industry. This is the backbone of the net zero 2030 goal. For the last decade, the price of solar panels has dropped precipitously. This price drop was the primary argument for the transition. Solar is cheaper than coal, they said. And for a while on paper it was. But that cheap price was based on two things: slave labor in the polysilicon supply chain and artificially suppressed silver prices. A standard photovoltaic solar panel is not just glass and silicon. It requires silver paste. This paste is printed onto the silicon wafers to conduct the electricity. Silver is the most conductive metal in the known universe. It is not a choice. It is a physical necessity. You cannot use copper. It corrodes and doesn't bond correctly with the silicon without expensive plating that destroys the economics. You cannot use gold. It's too expensive. It has to be silver. The average solar panel uses about 20 grams of silver. That doesn't sound like much. But when you're manufacturing billions of panels to power the entire grid, it adds up to hundreds of millions of ounces. In 2024, the solar industry alone consumed nearly 20% of the entire annual global supply of silver. That was when silver was $25 an ounce. At $25, the silver cost per panel was negligible, maybe $15 to $20 per unit. It was a line item. It didn't destroy the margin. But today, silver is $76. The cost of the silver in that panel has tripled. But it's not just the price, it's the availability. You can't buy the paste. Heraeus, the world's largest producer of silver photovoltaic paste, has reportedly stopped taking new orders. They can't source the raw bullion to make the product. So what happens to a solar manufacturer like First Solar or Jinko Solar? Their business model is based on power purchase agreements, PPAs. These are long-term contracts where they promise to deliver electricity at a fixed price, say 4 cents per kilowatt hour for 20 years. They signed these contracts in 2023 and 2024, assuming their manufacturing costs would stay flat or go down. They assumed silver would stay at $25. They bet the company on it. Now, their raw material costs have exploded. Every panel they build today loses money. They are hemorrhaging cash with every unit that rolls off the line. If they stop building, they breach their contracts and get sued into bankruptcy. If they keep building, they run out of cash and go bankrupt. This is why we're seeing trading halts on solar stocks this week. This is why the green energy ETFs like ICLN are crashing, while the broader market tries to figure out what is happening. The solar industry is insolvent, but it's worse than just bankruptcy. It's a physical hard stop. Even if the government prints $1 trillion to bail out these companies, money cannot conjure silver out of thin air. You cannot print conductivity. There's a massive solar project in the Nevada desert right now, the Gemini expansion. It was supposed to power 400,000 homes. Construction is halted, not because of labor strikes, not because of environmental permits, but because the supplier of the panels invoked force majeure. They simply cannot get the silver to finish the job. Multiply this by every solar project in Europe, in China, in India. The exponential growth curve of solar installation just hit a brick wall. The International Energy Agency, IEA, projected that we needed to install 600 gigawatts of solar every year to hit 2030 targets. That requires approximately 300 to 400 million ounces of silver annually, roughly half of global mine supply. And that was assuming efficiency improvements that haven't happened yet. The new TOPCon and HJT solar cell technologies, which are more efficient at generating power, actually use more silver, not less. The industry pivoted to silver-hungry tech, just as the silver supply ran dry. It is a tragedy of planning. It is a failure of strategic foresight. The entire premise of the Green Revolution was that we could manufacture our way out of climate change. We thought we could replace fuel, oil, gas, with technology, panels, tiles, or batteries. But technology is made of stuff, and the stuff is rare. The irony is palpable. The very demand created by the Green Revolution is what killed it. They squeezed the silver market so hard that they broke the mechanism that allowed them to exist. Now, look at the panic in the boardrooms of the major utility companies. They have shut down coal plants. They have decommissioned nuclear plants. They did this because they were promised cheap, abundant solar panels to fill the gap. Those panels are not coming. The grid operators are looking at the math. They are looking at the summer of 2026, just 6 months away. They know that without those new solar installations, the grid will not handle the air conditioning load. We are facing energy poverty in the developed world. The narrative is shattering. You will hear politicians in the coming weeks try to blame speculators or hoarders. They will blame the people who bought silver coins. They will blame the silver squeeze. Do not listen to them. This was structural. This was inevitable. You cannot demand infinite growth on a finite planet. You cannot build a new energy infrastructure on a metal that is in a structural deficit for 5 years running. The green energy revolution didn't die because we didn't want it. It died because we couldn't afford the caloric cost of the materials required to build it. Thermodynamics is a harsh mistress. And we haven't even talked about the other half of the equation yet. We haven't talked about the electric vehicle. If you think the solar situation is bad, wait until you see what is happening in Detroit and Wolfsburg. The solar panel is a relatively simple device. An electric vehicle is a rolling supercomputer that requires silver for everything from the engine management system to the power windows. And unlike a solar panel, you can't just leave it on a roof. It has to move. It has to be safe. It has to be reliable. The automotive industry is about to face a supply shock that makes the 2021 semiconductor shortage look like a minor inconvenience. The assembly lines aren't just slowing down, they are stopping. And the dream of the $25,000 electric car just evaporated into the ether. Let's shift our focus to the electric vehicle, EV industry. This was supposed to be the jewel in the crown of the new economy. General Motors promised to be all electric by 2035. Ford spent billions on the Model E division. Tesla became the most valuable car company on Earth based on the idea of infinite scaling. But today, look at the holding lots outside of factories in Michigan, Germany, and Shanghai. They are starting to fill up again, but not with finished cars. They are filling up with gliders, cars that are 99% complete, but missing the critical components required to make them run. In 2021, it was chips. In 2025, it is contacts, silver contacts. An internal combustion engine, ICE vehicle, uses about 15 to 20 grams of silver. It's used in the defrosters, the window switches, the basic electronics. But an electric vehicle is a different beast entirely. An EV uses between 55 and 60 grams of silver. Some high-performance models use up to 80 grams. Why? Because silver is the only metal that can handle the thermal loads of high-voltage electricity without melting or oxidizing. Every time you connect a battery to a motor, you need a connector. That connector needs to be plated in silver. The inverter, which converts DC battery power to AC motor power, is loaded with silver. The battery management system, BMS, which prevents the car from exploding, relies on silver membrane switches. Let's run the numbers. If the global auto industry wants to build 80 million cars a year, and half of them are EVs, you are talking about massive silver consumption. The Silver Institute projected that the auto sector alone would need 90 million ounces by 2025. But that projection assumed silver was available. It assumed you could just call a refiner and order a ton of industrial silver shot. Today, with silver at $76 and premiums on industrial shot hitting 100%, the supply chain is broken. The Tier 1 suppliers, companies like Bosch, Denso, and Magna, cannot source the raw metal to make the connectors, so the line stops. But the problem for EVs is deeper than just production. It's about cost. The value proposition of EVs has always been shaky. They are more expensive to build than gas cars. The only way they competed was through massive government subsidies and the promise that battery costs would fall. Battery costs have fallen, yes, but the balance of system costs have exploded. When the price of silver triples, the cost of the electrical architecture of the car spikes. Margins in the auto industry are razor thin, typically 5% to 8%. A $200 increase in raw material cost per unit can wipe out the entire profit margin of a vehicle. At $76 silver, automakers are faced with a choice: raise prices or sell cars at a loss. If they raise prices, demand collapses. Consumers are already stretched thin by inflation and high interest rates. They cannot afford a $60,000 electric crossover. If they sell at a loss, they go bankrupt. Remember, Ford's EV division was already losing $30,000 per car in 2024. They were subsidizing these losses with profits from selling gas-powered F-150s. But now, even the gas trucks are getting more expensive to build because they use silver too. This is the death spiral. The legacy automakers, Ford, GM, VW, pivoted their entire corporate strategy to EVs. They shut down engine plants, they fired combustion engineers, they burned their bridges. Now they are standing on the edge of the cliff, and the bridge to the future has collapsed. And it's not just the cars, it's the charging infrastructure. The Biden administration promised 500,000 EV chargers across America. The EU has similar targets. Have you ever looked inside a DC fast charger? It is a beast of electrical engineering. It handles 400 or 800 volts at massive amperage. To move that kind of current safely, you need massive amounts of silver in the relays, the breakers, and the contact points. A single supercharger stall contains significantly more silver than the car itself. With the silver shortage, the rollout of charging stations has ground to a halt. The companies building these chargers, ChargePoint, Blink, Tesla, are issuing warnings. They can't build them. And if they can't build the chargers, people won't buy the cars. It's a feedback loop of failure. I want you to imagine the logistics of this. We have mandates saying that by 2030, 50% of sales must be EVs. But the physical metal to build the cars and the chargers does not exist at a viable economic price. What happens when a law collides with reality? The law loses. We are already seeing the cracks. Last week, a major European automaker quietly lobbied the EU Commission to suspend the 2035 ban on combustion engines. They know they can't meet the target. They know the silver isn't there. But the public doesn't know yet. The public is still on the wait list for the new Cybertruck or the new electric Ford. They don't realize that their reservation is for a product that cannot be manufactured at scale anymore. And let's talk about the batteries themselves. While lithium and cobalt get all the headlines, silver is playing a growing role in next-generation solid-state batteries. These were the holy grail that would give us 600-mile range. Samsung SD and Toyota have been betting heavily on this tech. Guess what? Solid-state batteries often use a silver-carbon composite anode. They use more silver than current batteries. This technology, which was supposed to save the EV revolution, is now economically unviable before it even launched. The technological roadmap for the 21st century was drawn by people who thought resources were infinite. They thought the price of commodities would always stay low. They didn't account for a monetary crisis driving investors to hoard the very materials needed for industry. This is the key point. Investment demand is cannibalizing industrial supply. Every ounce of silver that goes into a safe in Texas or a vault in Singapore is an ounce that does not go into a Tesla. In the past, industry always won. If Apple needed metal, they paid the price. But now the monetary premium is so high, the fear of currency collapse is so real, that investors are outbidding industry. The hodlers are squeezing the builders. So the EV revolution dies. It doesn't end with a bang, but with an out-of-stock notification. It ends with price hikes that price out the middle class. It ends with a return to the old, reliable technologies that we tried to abandon. The parking lots full of unfinished cars are the tombstones of the Green New Deal. They are monuments to hubris. We tried to run before we could walk, and we tripped over the scarcity of the earth itself. The auto unions see it coming. Why do you think the UAW strikes were so vicious? They knew the EV transition was a job killer. But now, the silver shortage is an industry killer. If you own stock in EV companies, you are holding a bag of promises that cannot be fulfilled. If you're waiting for a charger to be built in your neighborhood, don't hold your breath. The copper is there, the steel is there, the concrete is there. But the silver, the magic dust that makes the electricity flow, is gone. We have discussed the physics of solar and the logistics of EVs. Now we must discuss the politics of delusion. The green energy revolution was not a market-driven phenomenon. It was a government-mandated one. It was driven by executive orders, by the Paris Agreement, by the Inflation Reduction Act, by the European Green Deal. Politicians love mandates. It costs them nothing to write a law that says, by 2030, we will emit 50% less carbon. It makes for great press conferences. It wins votes from the youth. It feels like leadership. But politicians are generally illiterate when it comes to supply chains. They believe that money equals results. If they pass a bill allocating $300 billion to green energy, they assume the energy will appear. They treat the economy like a vending machine. Insert dollars, get outcome. But the vending machine is empty. Right now in Washington, D.C. and Brussels, there is panic behind the scenes. The staffers are looking at the reports from the Department of Energy and the critical minerals watchdogs. They are realizing that their entire legislative legacy is about to crash into the silver deficit. The Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, offers massive tax credits for buying EVs and installing solar, but those credits are useless if the product doesn't exist. You can offer a $7,500 tax credit on a car, but if the car cannot be built because there are no silver contacts, the credit is zero. The government's response will be predictable. They will try to legislate physics. Watch for the invocation of the Defense Production Act, DPA, in the United States. The president will declare silver a strategic resource essential to national security. They will try to force mines to sell only to domestic industries. They will try to ban the export of silver bullion. But here's the problem. The U.S. government sold its strategic silver stockpile decades ago. We used to have billions of ounces. We sold it all. We have zero buffer. We are completely reliant on the open market and imports from Mexico and Peru. And Mexico and Peru are starting to get nationalistic about their resources. Why should they sell their silver to the US for paper dollars that are losing value when they can keep it in the ground or sell it to the highest bidder? This brings us to the geopolitical nightmare: China. China dominates the refining capacity for almost all critical minerals, including the processing of silver for industrial use. They control the solar supply chain. Over 80% of solar panels are made in China or by Chinese companies. They control the battery supply chain. China saw this coming. While the West was focused on ESG scores and diversity quotas in boardrooms, China was buying mines. China was building stockpiles. Now, with the physical shortage becoming acute, China is tightening the screws. We are already seeing export restrictions on gallium and germanium. Silver is next. If China decides to ban the export of silver paste or processed silver components, the Western green energy transition stops instantly, not in a year, today. We have outsourced our energy security to our primary geopolitical rival. We built a grid that depends on components we do not make, using materials we do not hold. The mandates for 2030 are now statistically impossible. To meet the targets set by the Biden and Trump administrations, we would need to discover, permit, and build 5 new major silver mines immediately. It takes 10 to 15 years to bring a mine online. We don't have 10 years. We have 4 days of inventory left in the COMEX. So what happens to the mandates? They will be ignored, but they won't be repealed immediately. The government hates to admit error. They will issue waivers. They will grant exemptions. They will allow utilities to keep coal plants open temporarily, which means permanently. They will allow car companies to sell gas cars due to supply chain constraints. They will dilute the standards until they are meaningless. But the damage is done. The capital has been malinvested. Trillions of dollars were poured into green tech startups that are now insolvent. That capital is gone. It was wasted on a dream that lacked the material foundation to exist. This is a crisis of legitimacy. When the government mandates something that is physically impossible, the people stop listening to the government. When the lights go out because the grid is unbalanced and the new capacity wasn't built, the people don't blame the sun, they blame the state. The green energy revolution was supposed to be a transition to a cleaner future. Instead, it has become a trap. We dismantled the old system before the new system was ready. We turned off the base load power, coal, nuclear, assuming the variable power, wind, solar, would be enough. It isn't, and without silver, it never will be. We are walking into an energy trap. We need energy to get materials, but we need materials to get energy. As silver prices soar, the cost of energy goes up. As the cost of energy goes up, it becomes more expensive to mine silver. It is a vicious cycle. The green premium, the extra cost you pay for clean energy, is about to become the green impossibility. The politicians will try to print their way out. They will offer subsidies to mining companies. They will talk about asteroid mining. They will talk about recycling. Let's address recycling. We can just recycle the old panels. No, we can't, not yet. The cost to recycle the tiny amount of silver in a solar panel is currently higher than the value of the silver itself, even at $76. And more importantly, the panels we installed 20 years ago have very little silver. The demand is now. Recycling is a trickle. Demand is a flood. The mandates were a lie. Not necessarily a malicious lie, but a lie born of ignorance. They thought the world was made of money. They forgot the world is made of atoms. And now the atoms are on strike. The timeline for 2030 is dead. The timeline for 2050 is dead. The entire framework of the Paris Agreement is null and void because the signatory nations physically cannot secure the metal required to fulfill their pledges. This is the biggest policy failure in human history. And it is unraveling in real time right now as the silver price ticks higher and the factory orders get canceled. The hard stop is here. The government can mandate gravity to stop, but the apple still falls. They mandated the green revolution, but the silver ran out. So the revolution is dead. The mandates are impossible. The factories are closing. What happens next? We U-turn, we panic, and we go back to what works. This is the phase of the crisis that the environmentalists dread most, but it is the only logical outcome. Humanity will not accept freezing in the dark. We will not accept a collapse of transportation. If we cannot have solar panels and electric cars, we will burn whatever we can find to keep the lights on. Welcome to the renaissance of fossil fuels. It has already started. In Germany, they are dismantling wind farms to expand coal mines. In China, they are permitting 2 new coal plants every week. This was happening even before the silver squeeze, but now it will accelerate into overdrive. The ESG, environmental, social, and governance narrative on Wall Street is evaporating. For years, massive funds like BlackRock punished oil companies. They divested from coal. They starved the fossil fuel industry of capital. But now, with the green tech sector crashing due to the silver shortage, the only sector making money is energy, real, dense, combustible energy. We are about to see a massive reallocation of capital. The money that was earmarked for the energy transition will flow back into oil and gas exploration. It has to. Because if we can't build renewables, we need to pump more oil to maintain our standard of living. This is the revenge of the old economy. The tech bros and the climate bureaucrats thought they could delete the oil industry. The silver market just reminded them that high tech requires high resource inputs. If you can't get the silver, you stick with the steel and the oil. This U-turn will be messy. It will be politically toxic. The Biden or Trump administration will have to stand up and say, we were wrong. Drill, baby, drill. Not for political reasons, but for survival reasons. We will see the reopening of nuclear plants. Nuclear is the only carbon-free source that is dense enough to replace coal and doesn't rely on the massive surface area and silver usage of solar. But nuclear takes time. In the short term, it's going to be natural gas and coal. The grid stability crisis is coming. The intermittency of wind and solar was supposed to be solved by batteries. But grid-scale batteries, BSS, require massive amounts of raw materials too. Without the silver for the control systems and the specialized electronics, the battery rollout stalls. So we will need peaker plants, gas turbines that turn on when the wind stops blowing. We will need more pipelines. We will need more refineries. The irony is that the green revolution, by failing so spectacularly, will likely lead to higher emissions in the short term than if we had never attempted the rapid transition at all. We wasted a decade chasing a silver-dependent fantasy instead of building robust, silver-efficient nuclear power. But what does this mean for you, the investor, the citizen? It means you need to rethink your portfolio. The growth stocks of the last decade, Tesla and Phase, Plug Power, are caught in the trap. They are priced for a world of infinite resource availability. That world is gone. The new winners are the owners of the stuff, the owners of the copper mines, the oil wells, the uranium deposits, and yes, the silver bullion. But wait, if the green revolution is dead, won't silver demand crash? This is the most common question. If solar dies, silver crashes, right? Wrong. First, the industrial demand doesn't go to zero. We will still try to build solar. We will still build electronics. We will still build missiles. The demand is inelastic, but more importantly, the monetary demand for silver has just woken up. The failure of the green revolution is a failure of government planning. It is a failure of the fiat currency system to allocate resources efficiently. When people realize the government broke the energy market, they lose faith in the currency. Silver is transitioning from an industrial metal back to a monetary metal. For 4,000 years, silver was money. For the last 50 years, we pretended it was just an industrial component like aluminum. We used it up. We threw it in landfills. Now that we are running out, the monetary premium returns. The price of silver will not be determined by how much First Solar can pay. It will be determined by how much you are willing to pay to protect your wealth from the coming stagflation. The green demand provided the floor. The monetary panic provides the rocket fuel. We are entering an era of energy realism. The utopian dreams of 2020, 2024 are over. We are waking up with a hangover, staring at a grid that is fragile, a supply chain that is broken, and a geopolitical map that is hostile. The future is not Star Trek. The future is Mad Max, with better smartphones. It is a scramble for resources. The silver in your safe is not just a coin. It is a unit of energy. It is a unit of manufacturing capacity. It is the bottleneck of the 21st century. As we pivot back to fossil fuels, the cost of everything will rise. Energy is the master resource. When energy gets expensive, food gets expensive, transportation gets expensive, life gets expensive. The green energy revolution didn't fail because of ideology. It failed because it ran a deficit with nature. It wrote checks that the crust of the earth could not cash. It's over. The mandates are paper tigers. The targets are hallucinations. We're going back to the physical reality of combustion, extraction, and scarcity. The silver squeeze was the signal. The factory shutdowns are the confirmation. The revolution is dead. Long live reality. If you understand this, you know what to do. You don't buy the hype. You buy the metal. You don't bet on the politicians. You bet on the periodic table. The lights are flickering. The assembly lines are halting. The wind turbines are spinning, but the grid can't take the load. And somewhere in a vault, a 1,000-ounce bar of silver just got repriced from industrial component to unobtainium.